I don't know if I should even be telling you this, but keeping it inside feels worse. So if you're listening, just know I'm not exaggerating. I was sent to replace a missing guard. That's all it was supposed to be. A simple job, a long, quiet night shift in the middle of nowhere, nothing more. But the man I was replacing, he didn't just disappear. He left behind rules and blood. When I first pulled up to the post, the road was empty, swallowed in fog. The kind of fog that makes the world feel smaller than it should be. My headlights cut through it like two weak knives, showing me glimpses of the forest on either side. Thick, dark trees pressed in close, their branches hanging like skeletal arms. I killed the engine and just sat there for a minute, staring at the shack. It wasn't much. A single wooden cabin with one dim light burning above the door. The kind of place that already felt wrong, like it was built for something more than just guarding an empty road. My boots crunched on gravel as I stepped out. The air was colder than I expected, damp, heavy, and smelling faintly of rust. When I reached the door, I noticed the first thing that made my stomach turn: scratches. Thin, desperate lines carved deep into the wood, too high up to be from an animal, too frantic to be from boredom. Inside, the shack was small. A desk, a chair, a radio, and a corkboard full of notes. It looked like someone had lived there for weeks, maybe months. Coffee cups gone stale, cigarette butts filling an ashtray, but what caught my eye was the notebook. It was open, right in the center of the desk, like someone wanted me to find it. The first page just said, "Rules." My chest tightened as I started to read. Never leave the shack after midnight. If you hear knocking on the door, don't answer. Don't look at the mirrors after 3 a.m. If the radio starts to crackle with voices, ignore them. If you see a man in the forest waving at you, never wave back. And the last one scribbled so hard the paper nearly tore. "Pray you make it until dawn." I froze. This wasn't a guard's routine. This was a warning. That's when I noticed the dark stain in the corner. At first, I thought it was oil, but when I stepped closer, the smell hit me. Iron, metallic, blood, a lot of it. It had soaked into the floorboards, thick and black with age. I felt my throat tighten. Whoever had worked here before me, he hadn't just walked away. The radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. A static hiss, then silence. My hands trembled as I reached for the dial, but before I touched it, a voice slipped through. Low, broken, almost like someone whispering too close to the mic. "Don't stay." I yanked my hand back like it was fire. The voice was gone, replaced by static. That's when I saw the other thing on the desk. A photo. It was of the missing guard. At least I think it was. A man in uniform, smiling awkwardly. But the photo had been ruined, scratched over with pen until the smile was crossed out. The eyes had been circled over and over until the paper tore through. My chest felt heavy. This wasn't just a shift. This was something else. Something I hadn't agreed to. I tried telling myself to leave. Just turn around, get back in the car, drive until the road ended. But as I reached for the door, I noticed the mirror hanging on the wall. At first, it was just me staring back. Pale, nervous, already regretting this job. But then the reflection twitched. Just a flicker, like bad reception on an old TV. My face stayed still, but the mirror me smiled. I stumbled back, slamming into the desk. The notebook fell to the floor, flipping to another page. More writing, scrawled fast as if in panic. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. The rules aren't suggestions. Follow them or you won't last the night. The mirror still shimmered at the edge of my vision. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. The reflection wasn't me anymore. It was someone else. And it was standing right behind me. I spun around, nothing. Just the empty shack, the shadows stretching too far in the corners. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the light. But as I steadied my breathing, I caught something carved into the floorboards near the stain, words etched deep as if with a knife. I tried, "I'm sorry." My skin crawled. This wasn't just a guard post. It was a trap, a grave waiting to be filled. And now it was mine. But here's the thing. That was only my first hour on the job. I hadn't even made it to midnight yet. And the real nightmare doesn't begin until the clock strikes 12. So tell me, would you have stayed or would you have run? Because I didn't run. And that was my first mistake. I told myself I could handle it, that rules on a piece of paper couldn't scare me. I'd worked bad shifts before. Nights where the cold made your bones ache, where boredom nearly killed you before the silence did. But this wasn't silence. This place was breathing, waiting. I sat down at the desk, staring at the clock above the radio. 11:42 p.m., 18 minutes until midnight. 18 minutes until the first rule mattered. My eyes kept drifting back to the notebook on the floor. The rules stared up at me like a dare. I tried distracting myself by checking the shack. The walls were lined with maps of the surrounding forest, but most had been scribbled on with red ink. Circles drawn around areas, big X's slashed through others. Next to one circle, someone had written a single word, "Don't." I didn't want to think about what that meant. The radio popped again, faint static carrying across the room. I flinched, every muscle tight, waiting for that voice to come back. But nothing, just the sound of my own breath, heavy and uneven. I checked the mirror again without meaning to. It was just me this time, tired and pale. But I couldn't shake the memory of that smile. That wasn't mine. By 11:58, the air had shifted. It's hard to explain. The shack felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in a fraction of an inch. The silence got heavier too, not empty silence, but the kind that comes right before someone whispers in your ear. Then the clock struck 12, and the knocking started. It was soft at first, just 3 little taps on the door. I froze, remembering the second rule: if you hear knocking on the door, don't answer. The knocks came again, louder this time, 4 of them, like someone was growing impatient. I gripped the edge of the desk, every nerve screaming to get up and check. What if it was just some hiker lost in the woods? What if it was the missing guard? What if ignoring it meant leaving someone to die? The knocks turned into pounding, heavy, furious, shaking the door on its hinges. I pressed my palms to my ears, but I could still feel it. The wood rattled, dust fell from the ceiling, then silence. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. My eyes were locked on that door, waiting for it to burst open, but it didn't. Instead, I heard something else, a voice. It was coming from outside, low, hoarse, broken. "Let me in." My skin turned to ice. The voice wasn't desperate, it wasn't pleading, it was mocking. "Let me in." I wanted to shout, to tell it to go away, but my throat wouldn't work. I just sat there, frozen in place, as the voice repeated again and again, each time sounding less human, more jagged, like words being dragged across metal. Finally, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat at that desk with my hands trembling, waiting for dawn like a prisoner counting the last hours of their sentence. But then, sometime around 3 a.m., I made my next mistake. I looked at the mirror. I shouldn't have. The third rule was clear: don't look at the mirrors after 3 a.m., but I wasn't thinking. My head turned on instinct, like I was being pulled. And what I saw, it wasn't me, not exactly. It was the shack. My reflection showed the room I was in, but not as it was. In the mirror, the walls were rotting, the light flickered, and the floor was covered in blood, pools of it, fresh, dark, and endless. And standing behind the desk where I sat was the missing guard. His face was pale, his eyes black pits. His jaw hung slack like it had been broken, and he was staring directly at me. I shoved the chair back, nearly falling over, but the reflection didn't move. He just stayed there, grinning wide with teeth too sharp to be real. I grabbed the notebook from the floor, clutching it like a lifeline. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep it open. On the last page, below the rules, something new had been written. The ink was smeared as if scrawled in panic. "If you see me in the mirror, it's too late." I dropped the book, heart hammering. The reflection still smiled. Blood still pooled around his boots, and then slowly his hand lifted. He waved at me. I ripped the mirror off the wall, shoving it face down onto the floor. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. I couldn't look. I wouldn't. By the time dawn broke, I was still sitting there, staring at that cracked mirror on the floor. The light of morning spilled through the window, chasing the shadows back. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare. But then I saw the notebook again. The words seemed darker now, burned into the page. "Pray you make it until dawn." I had survived the first night, barely, and deep down I knew something. The rules weren't to keep things out. They were to keep me in. The day after that first night, I told myself I wouldn't go back. I drove into town, parked outside the diner, and just sat there staring at my hands on the steering wheel. They were still trembling. I thought about going inside, finding the sheriff, telling him everything. The knocking, the mirror, the guard in the reflection. But the second I pictured the words leaving my mouth, I knew how it would sound. Crazy, delusional, another rookie who couldn't handle the woods. So I stayed quiet, ate half a sandwich I couldn't taste, drank coffee that went cold in my hands. All while the thought drilled into the back of my head, "You have to go back tonight." Not because anyone was making me, but because some part of me needed to know what would happen if I didn't. The shift started at 11 again. I parked my truck by the shack, the same dirt crunching under the tires, the same trees towering overhead. Except now they felt closer, like they had leaned in just to listen. Inside, everything was as I left it. The cracked mirror still on the floor, the notebook lying open where I dropped it. Only one thing had changed. On the desk next to the radio, there was a new page. It hadn't been there before. I knew it. My stomach twisted as I picked it up. The handwriting was messy, like someone had scrawled it in the dark. Rule 7, if the radio goes quiet, do not turn it back on. I swallowed hard. The radio hummed faint static, alive for now. But the words sat in my head like a weight. At 11:50, the woods outside felt restless. Branches creaked when there was no wind. The air pressed heavy against the windows. I sat at the desk, pretending to read the notebook, but really just waiting for the clock. Midnight came. This time, there was no knocking, no voice. Just silence so thick it felt like cotton stuffed in my ears. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might fill the room. Then the radio crackled. Static flared, followed by a voice, not the mocking one from before, but something worse. It was mine, my own voice, whispering through the static. "Don't look outside." The words repeated over and over, my voice, but flat, drained of life. "Don't look outside." I gripped the edge of the desk. My throat was dry. The windows were behind me. I could feel them, pressing on my back like a dare. The voice on the radio grew harsher, louder, demanding now. "Don't look outside." I squeezed my eyes shut, tried to block it out, but then something tapped on the glass. I snapped my head around before I could stop myself, and I saw them. Faces, dozens of them pressed up against the windows, pale and gray, eyes too wide, mouths hanging open. They didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. My stomach dropped, bell rising in my throat. I stumbled back, but their eyes followed me, every single one. The radio screamed static, then cut dead silent. I remembered the rule: if the radio goes quiet, do not turn it back on. I dropped to the floor, curling against the desk, refusing to look at the windows again. The silence stretched, heavier by the second, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breath. Then glass cracked. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the window closest to me. One of the faces leaned harder, skin splitting at the edges of its grin. I bit down on my fist to stop from screaming. The crack grew wider, but just as I thought the glass would give, the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. Light spilled into the shack, warm and golden, and the faces were gone. No cracks in the glass, no eyes staring in, just empty windows reflecting the morning sun. I stayed there on the floor, shaking. My jaw ached from how hard I'd bitten down. When I finally stood, the radio flicked back on by itself, humming soft static like nothing had happened. And on the desk, the notebook was open again. Another line had appeared, written in that same frantic scrawl: "Stop coming back." I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling so hard the cover nearly tore. But I knew I'd be back again, because it didn't matter what the rules said. The bloodstains outside the shack's door told me the missing guard had followed them once, and it hadn't saved him. And deep down, I needed to know, was I already following him into the same end? The next evening, I almost didn't go back. I sat in my truck for over an hour, engine idling, headlights carving into the empty road that led toward the forest. My hands gripped the wheel so tight they ached, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to drive until the gas tank bled dry. But it was the notebook. That last message, it wasn't just a warning. It was a command. And it made me wonder, if I stayed away, would something come for me anyway? I shut off the engine, listened to the crickets in the ditches. Then, against everything my body begged me to do, I restarted the truck and drove toward the shack. When I pulled up, the air felt different, heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I killed the headlights, sat in the dark, and stared at the shack's crooked outline. For a moment, it looked abandoned, like a forgotten shed left to rot. But then I saw it, thin streaks glistening dark against the dirt. Blood. It started right at the shack's steps. Long, uneven smears, as though something had been dragged inside. My throat tightened. I forced myself out of the truck, gravel crunching under my boots too loud in the silence. Each step closer, the smell hit me, copper and rot clinging to the air like a film. The streak led up the steps, across the porch, right to the door. I froze. That door had been shut every time I came before. Tonight it hung slightly open, wood groaning as it shifted in the night air. I swallowed hard and pushed it open. The inside was darker than I remembered. The single bulb overhead flickered weakly, casting shadows that seemed to twitch along the walls. The notebook sat on the desk where I'd left it, closed this time, its cover smeared with something dark. The streak of blood cut across the floorboards, thick and wet, leading past the desk and toward the back of the shack, toward the mirror. Except the mirror wasn't cracked anymore. It stood tall against the wall, whole and gleaming, the glass polished so clean it seemed to glow. And in it, I saw the streak of blood ending right at its base, as if something had been pulled into the reflection itself. I don't remember deciding to move, but my feet carried me closer. My stomach churned, bile sharp at the back of my throat. The air grew colder with every step. When I stood in front of it, I expected to see myself. But the figure in the glass wasn't me. It was him, the missing guard. Same uniform, same hat tilted low. His chest rose and fell, shallow, ragged, but his eyes, God, his eyes, were hollow, like he'd been hollowed out from the inside. Blood soaked the front of his shirt, pooling at his belt, dripping into nothing where the reflection should have ended. He lifted a hand, slow and trembling, and he pointed at me. I stumbled back, my shoulder slamming into the desk. The notebook fell open, pages fluttering until they stopped on a fresh scrawl. "Follow the trail before it follows you." My pulse hammered in my ears. I glanced back at the mirror. The guard's mouth opened, soundless, lips shaping words I couldn't hear. Then his eyes snapped upward past me toward the door, and that's when I heard it. The porch creaked, slow, heavy, like something enormous had just stepped onto it. I killed the lamp with a trembling hand. The shack plunged into darkness, the only light the faint silver glow of the mirror. The footsteps dragged across the porch, closer. The air thickened, pressing into my chest until each breath felt stolen. Then the door slammed shut. The sound rattled the shack, dust raining from the beams above. I pressed myself into the corner, notebook clutched to my chest like a shield. My eyes burned, straining against the dark, and then came the breathing. Low, wet, right on the other side of the room. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened, every nerve screaming. Then silence. I risked a glance at the mirror. The guard was gone. The glass showed only me now, pale, shaking, eyes wide with terror. Behind me, the room was empty, but the floor where the blood trail had ended was clean, as if it had never been there at all. I staggered forward, every step like wading through concrete. My legs barely obeyed. I grabbed the notebook, slammed it shut, and bolted out the door. Outside, the forest seemed alive. Branches shivered though there was no wind, and shadows moved where nothing stood. My truck sat waiting at the edge of the clearing, headlights off, dark as the rest of the night. I sprinted, boots slipping in the dirt. My lungs burned. I didn't look back, couldn't. When I finally slammed the truck door and locked it, I sat in the dark, chest heaving, sweat dripping down my neck. My hands shook as I turned the key, praying the engine wouldn't stall. It roared to life. I didn't look at the shack again as I tore down the road. But I swear, in the rearview mirror, I saw a second pair of headlights flare on from the trees behind me. And they followed all the way to town. I didn't sleep that night, not a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mirror, the guard pointing at me. The blood smeared across the floor that vanished as soon as I ran, and worst of all, the headlights in my rearview mirror. They followed me into town, right up to the gas station where I pulled in, shaking so bad I almost dropped the nozzle. But when I turned around, the road behind me was empty. Just trees and shadows, no car, no lights, nothing. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A rookie guard saying he saw a bleeding reflection and ghost headlights. They'd laugh or worse, fire me. And a small, selfish part of me didn't want to quit, not yet, because I needed to know what happened to him. The missing guard. By dawn, I drove back to my apartment, locked every door, drew every curtain, and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook. I flipped through the pages, my fingers trembling over the jagged scrawls. Most of it was rules, warnings, fragmented advice, but tucked between them were notes, personal ones. It watches when you're not watching back. Never let the mirror catch you sleeping. If you see yourself blink in the reflection when you didn't, run. I pushed the book away, stomach twisting. My reflection, my own face. That was the thing I couldn't get out of my head. What if it wasn't me in the mirror anymore? That night, when I drove back to the shack, I noticed something different before I even stepped out of the truck. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no owls, just dead silence pressing in from every side, and then I saw it. Someone was standing at the tree line, not close, maybe 50 yards away, a figure, tall, still, watching. I squinted, trying to make out details, man or woman, guard or stranger, but as soon as I blinked, the figure was gone. I forced myself out of the truck, legs unsteady, and walked toward the shack. My boots felt like anchors. Every step I waited to hear movement behind me, but nothing came, only silence. The shack looked the same. Door shut this time, lamp inside faintly glowing like it was waiting for me. I stepped in, holding my breath. The notebook was back on the desk, closed neatly. But what froze me wasn't the desk. It was the mirror. Someone had dragged it across the floor, scraping deep grooves into the boards. It stood angled toward the door now, tilted so that the first thing you saw when you entered was your own reflection. And there I was, pale, sweating, eyes wide, but my reflection smiled. I stumbled back so fast I knocked over the chair. My breath caught in my throat, chest locking up. The reflection lifted its hand slow like the missing guard had done and tapped the glass once. A dull, hollow sound that rattled in my bones. I didn't move, couldn't. Then I heard it, footsteps, not behind me this time, above me, on the roof. Heavy, deliberate steps pacing back and forth, dust raining down from the beams. My head snapped upward, heart racing. I gripped the notebook tight, every instinct screaming to get out. The reflection's smile widened, and then the steps stopped. Silence. I took one careful step back, then another, keeping my eyes on the glass. My reflection tilted its head, movements just a fraction too slow, too delayed, like it was thinking before it copied me. And then the notebook snapped open in my hands. Pages whipped like a storm until they stopped on a single line written in fresh, wet ink. The watcher knows you now. I dropped the book. It hit the floor with a slap, blood smearing across the page. Something scraped down the outside wall of the shack. Long, dragging claws on wood. The sound made my teeth ache, my skull vibrate. I ran. I didn't look back, not at the mirror, not at the shack. I tore out the door, sprinted across the clearing, and threw myself into the truck. My hands shook so violently it took 3 tries to jam the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life and I floored it. Gravel sprayed behind me as the shack disappeared into the darkness. But halfway down the road, headlights flared in my rear view again. Only this time they weren't behind me. They were right beside me. No car, no engine, just 2 orbs of white light gliding through the trees, keeping pace with my truck as if the forest itself had eyes. I pressed harder on the gas, heart hammering, eyes locked on the road. The lights followed, never falling behind, never swerving, just watching. And then just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. The forest went dark again. I drove until the sun came up. I didn't dare stop, not once. When I finally pulled into my apartment's lot, my hand still shook as I turned off the engine. I sat there staring at the steering wheel, breath shallow. And then I saw it. On my windshield. 3 words smeared in something dark, written backward so I'd read them from the driver's seat. You were seen. I didn't sleep after what happened on my windshield. How could I? Those 3 words, you were seen, burned themselves into my skull. Every time I blinked, I saw them written in that smeared, dark streak across the glass. I told myself it was just some sick prank. Maybe the missing guard, not dead but hiding, playing with me. But deep down, I knew better. By morning, the words had faded. Not washed away, not smudged by dew or rain, just gone. Like they'd never been there at all. I should have quit. I should have turned in the keys and walked away. But the problem was, part of me didn't know if I could. Because when I woke up that morning, the notebook was sitting on my nightstand. I never brought it home. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't even want to touch it, but it was open to a page I hadn't seen before. The handwriting looked rushed, frantic, and it said only this: "It hides where the light can't go. Do not go below." My apartment doesn't have a basement, but the shack does. I didn't know that until then. The next shift, I drove back to the woods with dread curling in my chest. The shack stood there like always, small and unimposing, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was waiting for me. Inside, the mirror leaned against the far wall, draped now with a torn sheet like someone had tried to cover it. I didn't want to test whether it was my reflection smiling back. I kept my eyes down, flashlight cutting through the dust and shadows. That's when I saw it, a hatch, wooden, half hidden beneath the rug near the desk. The boards around it looked old, splintered, like they hadn't been touched in years. There was no lock, just a ring of iron to pull it open. I froze. The note's words screamed in my head: "Do not go below, but curiosity is cruel. Curiosity whispers that you'll never sleep again if you don't know." So I opened it. The hatch groaned like something alive. A wave of cold air rolled up from the dark, smelling of wet dirt and rusted metal. My flashlight cut into the hole, but the beam barely reached the first few steps of a wooden staircase vanishing into black. My skin prickled. Every nerve in me wanted to close it and never touch it again. But I put one foot down on the step, then another. The stairs creaked under my weight. Dust fell in soft streams. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My breath puffed white in front of me, even though it was late summer outside. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed a narrow hallway. The walls weren't wood like above, they were stone, damp and slick with moss. Old pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping steadily into puddles on the ground. And then I saw the first sign, a smear of blood on the wall, long like someone's hand had dragged across the stone. The beam of my light trembled as I moved forward, more smears. Faint at first, then darker, thicker, and then words, written in blood. "Don't trust your eyes." My stomach lurched. The air felt heavier, pressing against my chest. I kept walking, though every step screamed at me to turn back. The hallway opened into a larger room, stone walls, low ceiling, and in the middle, a chair, metal, rusted, straps bolted to the arms and legs, and beneath it a dark stain that spread wide, soaked deep into the floor. I nearly turned and ran right then, but something flickered at the edge of my flashlight's beam. Another mirror, this one smaller, propped against the far wall. I lifted the light and my heart stopped. The mirror didn't show me, it showed the missing guard. His face pale, eyes hollow, blood caked down his chin. He sat in the chair behind me, strapped in tight, head hanging forward. I spun around, the flashlight slicing across the room. The chair was empty, nothing but rust and stains. When I turned back to the mirror, the guard's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto mine. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a gaping scream I couldn't hear. And then slowly he raised his hand. Not at me, at the dark corner behind me. My body froze. I didn't want to turn. Every instinct begged me not to, but I did. The flashlight revealed only stone and shadows, empty. But when I looked back at the mirror, there was something else in the reflection. A shape, tall, thin, lurking just behind me. I couldn't see its face, only its eyes, two white circles glowing faintly in the dark. I bolted. I don't even remember climbing the stairs. I only remember the sound. The pounding footsteps behind me, shaking the boards as I scrambled up. The hatch slammed shut above me, though I never touched it. I collapsed against the wall of the shack, gasping, sweat freezing on my skin. My flashlight clattered to the floor. The hatch sat closed, silent, as though it had never been opened. And then the notebook flipped open on the desk. New words appeared, the ink bleeding across the page in real time, forming shaky, jagged letters. It's not trapped anymore. I left the shack that night shaken to my core. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Who would believe me? Hey, my reflection showed a dead guy warning me about something with glowing eyes. Yeah, that would go over real well. But when I got home, I realized the nightmare didn't stay in the woods. The first thing I noticed was the smell. My apartment had always smelled faintly like coffee and dust. That night, when I opened the door, a thick, coppery stench hit me in the face. The smell of blood. I froze in the doorway. My hand shook as I flicked on the lights. Nothing. No one waiting in the shadows, but the smell only grew stronger as I walked inside, and then I saw it. On my living room carpet, in the faint yellow glow of the lamp, were stains. Dark, irregular shapes soaked deep into the fibers. Blood. I swore my knees almost gave out. My apartment was locked when I left. No broken windows, no forced entry. No one else had keys. I backed up, heart hammering, telling myself it was impossible. Maybe it wasn't blood. Maybe I spilled wine I didn't remember, but I knew the truth before I even crouched down. It was sticky, metallic, fresh, and it hadn't been there that morning. I stumbled back, staring at it, my mind racing. Was it mine? No. No cuts, no injuries. Then whose and why here? That's when I noticed the notebook. It sat on my kitchen counter, open to a new page. The handwriting was sharp, rushed, as though scrawled in panic. It follows. My breath caught. The stains seemed to spread as I stared at them. Not physically growing, but every time I blinked, they looked wider, darker, seeping further into the carpet, like they were alive, inching closer to my feet. I grabbed the notebook and slammed it shut. Then I dragged a chair over the stains and sat there, watching, waiting for them to do something. But they didn't move again. They just sat there, mocking me with their silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the pipes made my skin crawl. My eyes kept drifting to the carpet, convinced the stains would climb out and crawl toward me. When dawn finally came, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over, until I looked in the bathroom mirror. The stains were on my shirt, not visible under normal light, just faint shadows. But in the mirror, I could see them clearly, spreading across the fabric like hands pressed into me. I ripped the shirt off, threw it in the trash, and stood there trembling in the bathroom, the taste of iron heavy in my mouth. That's when the lights flickered, and for half a second I wasn't looking at myself anymore. I was looking at the guard, his face pale, lips cracked, eyes wide with terror, and behind him those glowing circles again, watching. The light steadied. My reflection returned, but I wasn't alone. A low creak echoed from my living room. I stepped out, heart in my throat. The chair I'd placed over the stains had been dragged aside, and the stains were gone, vanished. But the notebook sat in the middle of the carpet, open again, waiting. The words on the page made my skin crawl. It leaves nothing clean, not walls, not floors, not you. I felt something then, not fear, not shock, but inevitability. Like no matter what I did, no matter how tightly I locked the doors or how far I ran, this thing had already marked me. The stains weren't just reminders. They were warnings, and if I didn't figure out what it wanted, I wasn't going to be around much longer. And then I heard it. Not a creak, not a whisper, a drip, steady, slow, coming from my ceiling. When I looked up, I saw it, dark liquid bleeding through the plaster, one drop at a time, hitting the floor with a heavy tap, tap, tap. I didn't need to taste it to know what it was. Blood. The sound of dripping blood from the ceiling wasn't something I could ignore. I stood there in my living room, frozen, staring up as each dark drop fell, splattering into the carpet where the stains had been hours earlier. It wasn't random either. The rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. Tap, 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 like something was keeping time. I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and touched the wet spot on the plaster. My fingers came back slick and dark. That copper smell filled the air again. My stomach turned. There was only one apartment above mine, apartment 3B. I'd lived in this building for 2 years, and in all that time I'd barely seen the guy. A man in his 40s maybe, with thinning hair and a permanent hunch in his shoulders. He never smiled, never said more than a grunt when I passed him on the stairs. Always wore the same gray jacket even in the heat of summer. I never thought much of it until now. I grabbed my keys, threw on a hoodie, and went upstairs. My hand shook as I knocked on his door. Nothing. I knocked harder. Hello, something's leaking into my place. Silence. I pressed my ear to the wood. At first nothing, then footsteps, slow, shuffling, coming toward the door. Relief washed through me. He was home. Maybe this was something simple, a busted pipe, a sick pet, something explainable. But the footsteps stopped right at the other side, inches from me, and then I heard it. A whisper, not words I could understand. Just a low rasp like someone dragging broken glass across their throat. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My instinct screamed to leave, but I forced myself to knock again. Hey, I'm serious. If you don't open up, I'll have to call maintenance. The whispering stopped. The silence was worse. Then slowly the lock clicked. The door creaked open just an inch. The smell hit me immediately, rot, mold, and something sour underneath, like meat left out too long. Through the narrow gap I saw his eye, bloodshot, ringed in yellow, staring at me without blinking. "Sir?" I asked, my voice breaking. The gap closed, then the lock clicked again. I stood there, stunned, staring at the door. What the hell had I just seen? I almost turned to leave, but then I noticed something. On the floor, just outside his doorframe, was a smear. Dark, thick, dragged across the tile, a bloodstain, and it led back inside. I should have walked away. I should have called the cops. But curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, pulled me in. I tried the handle, unlocked. I pushed the door open. The stench was overwhelming. I gagged as I stepped inside. The apartment was dim, blinds drawn tight, the air heavy with dampness, and the stains. They were everywhere, on the walls, across the ceiling, splattered across the floor. Not just drops anymore, but handprints, smears. Like someone had been dragged across every surface, fighting to escape. "Hello." My voice cracked. No answer. I stepped further inside, each breath a struggle against the choking rot. The furniture was sparse, just a couch, a table, a broken lamp, but the notebook on the table caught my eye immediately. The same notebook, the same kind of sharp, frantic handwriting. I picked it up, flipping to the most recent page. "He's not upstairs, not anymore. Don't trust the man in gray." My stomach dropped. I spun around, suddenly aware of how quiet the apartment was, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, making every heartbeat sound deafening. And then I saw it. A smear on the carpet leading down the hallway toward the bedroom. I followed it. Each step felt heavier, like I was walking into quicksand. The bedroom door was ajar. The smear vanished into the darkness beyond. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No bed, no dresser, nothing. Just bare walls, bare floor, except for one thing. A single chair in the middle of the room, and on it the gray jacket. I recognized it instantly. The jacket the neighbor always wore, except it wasn't clean. It was soaked through, dark, stiff with blood. I backed away, my breathing sharp and uneven. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. From the corner of the room, something shifted. I turned, eyes wide, scanning the shadows. Nothing, just darkness pressing in. But I heard it again, that whisper, this time closer. I stumbled back into the hall, heart pounding, and nearly tripped over something on the floor. Another notebook, This one open like it had been placed there for me to find. The words chilled me to the bone. If you see him, it's already too late. And that was the moment I realized, whatever was in 3B, it wasn't my neighbor anymore. I slammed my apartment door shut the second I got back inside. My chest heaved, my palms slick with sweat. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, then pressed my back against the door as if my weight alone could keep out whatever I'd just seen in 3B. But the thing was, what had I seen? A jacket soaked in blood, handprints smeared across walls, whispering in the dark, and the notebook telling me, "Don't trust the man in gray." The man in gray. I had no doubt now it meant my upstairs neighbor, or whatever was left of him. I needed to think, to breathe. I sat down at my kitchen table, notebook still clutched in my hand. I flipped back through the pages, desperate for something, anything that could make sense of this. Most of it was scribbles, rambling, half-sentences that broke off. But every few lines, one phrase repeated over and over. "He waits in the corner." I shut the notebook fast. My skin crawled at the thought. And then knock. I froze. 3 soft taps at my door. My blood ran cold. Nobody ever came by at this hour. "Who is it?" My voice cracked. Silence. Then slowly the knock came again, not louder, not impatient, just steady. Tap, tap, tap. I crept to the peephole, my heart hammering. And there he was, the man in gray. He stood in the hallway facing my door. His posture was wrong, his back bent too far, head tilted unnaturally to the side, like his neck couldn't quite hold it up anymore. That same gray jacket clung to him, wet and dark in patches. His hands hung at his sides, limp, but I could see the stains even from here. Blood. But it was his face that made my stomach twist. His skin was pale, almost waxy, stretched too tight over his skull. His eyes, red, rimmed with yellow, stared directly at the peephole, unblinking, like he knew I was there. I backed away, every nerve screaming at me to run. Then he whispered, right through the door. I couldn't make out the words, just that same rasping, broken glass sound. Low, jagged, not human. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I dialed 911, pressing it to my ear. 911, what's your emergency? There's my voice cracked. There's a man outside my apartment. He's covered in blood. He won't leave. Stay calm, sir. What's your address? I rattled it off, my eyes never leaving the door. We'll send officers immediately. Stay inside. Do not open the door. I hung up, clutching the phone like a lifeline. But when I looked back through the peephole, he was gone. The hallway was empty. I sagged against the wall, barely able to breathe. Relief, confusion, dread, they all tangled together in my chest. I thought I was safe until I heard it. Not outside, inside. From the corner of my living room came that same whisper. I turned slowly, every muscle locking up. The corner was empty, just shadows stretching long in the dim light. But the sound was there, closer. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a kitchen knife, and edged toward the corner. "Get out," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. "You're not real." The whispering stopped, and then my lamp flickered just once, a quick blink. When it came back, he was there, the man in gray, crouched in the corner, his body twisted, bones jutting at odd angles. His head snapped toward me, eyes locked on mine. His mouth stretched wide, too wide, like the skin might tear. I stumbled back, the knife trembling in my grip. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. I blinked and he was gone. The corner was empty again. I gasped, my chest tight, sweat dripping down my back. Had I imagined it, hallucinated from stress? I didn't get long to wonder, because outside my window I heard footsteps. I lived on the 2nd floor. There shouldn't have been anyone walking outside my window. I crept to the blinds, my stomach sinking. Slowly, I lifted one slat to peek outside, and there he was again, standing on the fire escape inches from the glass, the man in gray. His face was pressed against the window, lips curling up in a grotesque grin. His hand rose, leaving a streak of blood across the glass. I dropped the blinds, stumbling backward. My knife clattered to the floor. And then from the hallway outside my door, footsteps, heavy, slow, coming closer, 2 places at once. That's when I realized, whatever this thing was, it wasn't human anymore. It wasn't my neighbor, and it wasn't bound by rules I understood. I pressed myself into the corner of my apartment, trembling, whispering to myself like the notebook had warned. He waits in the corner, and I couldn't help but think, what happens when he decides to step out of it? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I sat in the corner of my bedroom with every light on, clutching the knife I'd dropped earlier. The blinds were pulled tight, the deadbolt checked over and over again, but none of it mattered. Not after what I'd seen. Every creak of the floor above me made me flinch. Every hum of the fridge sounded like whispering. I kept repeating the words from the notebook in my head, like a mantra I didn't believe but couldn't ignore. He waits in the corner, but waiting for what? Around 4 a.m., I finally looked at the notebook again. The words blurred at first, my vision hazy from exhaustion. Then I noticed something that hadn't been there before, new writing. The ink looked wet, smudged in spots as if it had been written recently. Rule 5 has changed. I blinked hard, my stomach twisting. There hadn't even been a Rule 5. The notebook only had 4 rules scrawled at the beginning. I flipped back frantically to the first page. Sure enough, there it was now. Rule 5, don't let him inside. My throat tightened. I hadn't written that, and whoever or whatever had, it was already too late. I had let him inside. The realization dropped on me like ice water. Every part of me screamed to get out, but where would I go? The hallways were worse, the building cursed. And if he could appear in corners, on fire escapes, at my door, then he wasn't bound by walls. I set the notebook down, trying not to hyperventilate. That's when the scratching started. At first it was faint, nails on wood, a soft drag from the closet across the room. I gripped the knife tighter, eyes locked on the closet door. The scratching grew louder, faster, then a whisper, "Let me out." I shook my head, my whole body trembling. "You're not real," I whispered back. "You're not." The closet door rattled. Once, twice, then it stopped. Silence. I didn't move for a long time. My body ached from staying frozen, my ears straining for the next sound. And just when I thought maybe it had stopped, the notebook on the floor flipped open on its own. Pages tore past until it landed near the back on a blank sheet. Slowly, words etched themselves across the paper in jagged black ink. "You can't follow the old rules anymore. He writes the new ones." My mouth went dry. I leaned forward, watching in horror as another line appeared beneath it, letter by letter. Rule 6, don't watch him too long. He notices. And that's when I realized I was staring at the closet door again. My breath caught. I forced my eyes away, but it felt like trying not to look at a car crash. Every instinct screamed at me to keep watching, to know where he was. But if the rule was right, watching meant he'd notice. And if he noticed, what then? I shut the notebook hard, shoved it under the bed, and turned every lamp brighter. I tried to convince myself this was all sleep deprivation. Stress, a trick of the mind. Until my phone buzzed. A new text message. Unknown number. "Why did you stop watching?" I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, screen glowing. The message stayed there like a threat. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. Another buzz. "Look at me." My throat closed. Slowly, against every instinct, I lifted my eyes back to the closet. The door was wide open. Darkness pooled inside, thick and heavy. I couldn't see the back wall anymore, just endless black. And then he stepped out. The man in gray, but something about him had changed. He was taller now, his limbs longer, his movements jerky like a puppet on strings. The gray jacket sagged off him, torn in places, soaked darker than before. His head tilted back, and I saw his grin, wider, sharper, impossible for a human face. I stumbled backward, knife raised, my voice cracking. "Stay the hell away." He didn't lunge, didn't speak. He just stood there watching me, his body twitching in short, unnatural bursts. And then he pointed at the notebook under my bed. I shook my head. No more games, but his arm didn't lower. His finger stayed fixed, almost like he was telling me the rules aren't done yet. My chest tightened as I realized what this meant. I wasn't just being haunted, I was being taught, conditioned. This wasn't about surviving the night. It was about learning how to play by his rules. I swallowed hard, the knife trembling in my hand as his whisper filled the room again, sliding under my skin like ice. "You don't quit, not until the last rule is written." And for the first time, I believed him. Because if the rules could change once, they could change again. And one day, the final rule would be the one that killed me. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days after that night. The knife never left my hand, and the notebook stayed sealed inside a drawer I duct-taped shut. But no matter how much I tried to shut it away, the words wouldn't leave me. "You don't quit, not until the last rule is written." The voice, the grin, the impossible way he moved, it looped in my head over and over. Every time I tried to sleep, I swore I heard the closet door creak open again. And when I finally did pass out from sheer exhaustion, I woke up to find new words carved into my nightstand. 3B. Just that, over and over, scratched deep into the wood. Apartment 3B, the place where the missing guard had lived, the one I was sent to replace. I knew what it meant. He was pushing me back there. By the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. Food had run out, the lights flickered like they were tired of protecting me, and the smell, God, the smell of something rotting was seeping in through the vents. It had to be coming from 3B, so I went back. The hallway felt tighter than before, like the walls had swollen inwards. Every door I passed looked abandoned, the peepholes black, like someone was staring out but didn't want to be seen. My footsteps echoed too loudly, even though I was trying to walk soft. When I reached 3B, the tape was still across the door frame. But the door itself, it was cracked open, just enough for darkness to spill out. I gripped the knife harder, wiped my sweaty palm on my jeans, and pushed the door wide. The smell hit me first. Sour, thick, almost sweet in the worst way, like meat left out in the sun too long. I gagged, pulling my shirt up over my nose, but stepped inside anyway. The air was heavy, the kind that clings to your skin. At first glance, the apartment looked almost normal. The furniture was there, though covered in dust. A chair tipped over in the corner. The couch cushions torn up like someone had clawed through them. But then I saw the walls. Every inch of them was covered in writing. Black scrawls layered over each other, phrases running in jagged lines across the plaster. Some words were smeared, others scratched so deep into the wall that flakes of paint littered the floor. And all of them were rules. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some repeated what I'd seen before. Don't look at him too long. Don't let him inside. Others were new. Never turn off the hallway light. Don't walk past the 3rd stair after midnight. Don't answer if they knock more than twice. Each one worse than the last. My stomach churned. The missing guard hadn't just left notes. He'd covered his whole damn apartment with them, and then I saw it. In the center of the living room, nailed into the floor, was the guard's uniform. The gray jacket, same as the man I'd seen, only this one was shredded, soaked in old, dried blood. My legs almost gave out. That's when I heard movement from the bedroom down the hall. Slow, dragging footsteps. I backed toward the door, knife up, trying not to breathe too loud. But before I could leave, the notebook in my pocket vibrated. I froze, pulling it out with shaking hands. It had flipped itself open again to a blank page. And right in front of my eyes, words began to appear. "Don't run. He likes when they run." I swallowed hard, forcing my feet to stay planted. The bedroom door creaked open, and he stepped out. Not the man in gray this time. Not exactly. This one looked wrong. His skin sagged, gray and stretched like it was melting. His face had no mouth, only a slit running down where lips should be. His hands dragged along the wall, leaving streaks of black behind. He wasn't looking at me, not yet. His head tilted from side to side, sniffing the air like a predator. The notebook buzzed again. Another line scrawled itself. "He doesn't see you if you stay still." Every nerve in my body screamed to bolt out the door, but I stayed. Frozen. The thing shuffled past me, its shoulder nearly brushing mine. The stench coming off it was unbearable, sour and chemical, like rotting flesh mixed with gasoline. My eyes watered. I clenched my jaw to stop my teeth from chattering. It moved into the living room, head twitching toward the nailed-down jacket. For a moment, I thought maybe that was it, that it would stay there, crouching over the blood-soaked fabric like an animal with its kill. But then it stopped, and slowly, its head rotated back toward me. The slit on its face stretched wider, opening just enough to show rows of broken, jagged teeth. And in a voice like wet paper tearing, it whispered, "You're not him." My heart slammed in my chest. My grip on the knife faltered. Then it started moving toward me. The notebook vibrated so hard it nearly flew out of my hand. I glanced down at it, desperate. One last line was etching itself in bold, jagged letters. Rule 7, if it knows your name, you can't leave. I didn't wait to find out if it did. I bolted, ignoring the warning, slamming through the door of 3B and sprinting down the hallway. The thing's footsteps thundered after me, faster now, sharper, claws scraping against the walls as it chased. I didn't stop, couldn't stop, because if that thing already knew my name, then I wasn't running to escape. I was running to buy time. I didn't stop running until my knees buckled halfway down the stairwell. My lungs burned, my throat tasted of rust, and my vision blurred. But even then, I didn't dare stop completely. I slid down the last few steps, shoulder crashing against the concrete wall, knife still clutched tight. The building was dead silent, too silent. No footsteps, no scraping, no whispering voice behind me. But that didn't mean it wasn't there. The words from the notebook seared themselves into my brain. Rule 7, if it knows your name, you can't leave. I sat there gasping, trembling so hard my teeth rattled. Did it know me? Did it whisper my name when its mouth split open? I couldn't be sure. My head was pounding too hard, my blood rushing too loud. I reached for the notebook again. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it, but when I flipped it open, the pages weren't blank this time. They were filled, covered in frantic scrawl. My name, over and over, dozens of times, scratched deep enough into the paper that the pages tore. I choked on my own breath, slammed the book shut, and pressed it against my chest like holding it tighter would stop the truth. It knew me. I was trapped. For the first time since this nightmare began, I thought about walking straight out the front doors of that building. Screw the rules, screw the job, screw whatever blood-soaked contract I'd signed without even knowing it. I thought about pushing past the lobby, feeling the night air on my face and never looking back, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear of the creature, not exactly. It was the feeling deep in my gut that if I left now, I'd never make it past the threshold, not alive. I had to understand the seventh rule. I staggered back up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. My mind replayed the guard's apartment, the walls of rules, the nailed-down jacket. He'd written so many, but he hadn't escaped either. So what did he know that I didn't? When I reached my own door, I noticed something new. The number plate 4C had been scratched out. In its place, someone had carved 3B into the wood. I froze. Slowly, I turned the handle. Inside, my apartment wasn't mine anymore. The furniture was rearranged. The couch was shoved against the wrong wall. The table was flipped upside down. My own pictures, the ones I'd hung to make this place feel like home, were gone, replaced by torn photographs of people I didn't recognize. And on the far wall, written in long streaks of something dark and wet, "Welcome back." The notebook buzzed in my hands, flipping open violently to a new page. The words wrote themselves, quick and jagged. Rule 7 is binding. If it knows your name, you must finish his list. Every rule, everyone he didn't complete, or you take his place. My throat closed. That was it. The missing guard, the one I'd been sent to replace, he hadn't vanished. He'd been claimed, bound by the same rule, and when he failed, the job was passed down to me. I dropped into the nearest chair, head in my hands, rocking back and forth like a madman. Finished the list. There had to be hundreds, maybe thousands of rules scratched across those walls in 3B. How the hell was I supposed to finish something endless? The room suddenly went cold. My breath puffed out in the air in front of me, and then I heard it. Knocking. Soft, slow, once, twice, 3 times. The notebook vibrated violently, scrawling words across the page. Do not answer if they knock more than twice. My blood ran cold. The knocking came again. 3 sharp raps echoing through the apartment. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then from the other side of the door, a voice whispered my name. Not loud, not angry, just casual, almost friendly. Hey, open up. It's just me. You know me. Every instinct screamed at me to answer, to throw the door open, to end this nightmare. But the notebook shook so hard I thought it might explode in my hands. Do not answer, do not answer, do not answer. The whisper came again, louder, closer. Come on, don't make me wait out here. I know you can hear me. The doorknob rattled. The lock clicked once, then again, like invisible fingers were testing it. I pressed myself back into the chair, knife trembling in my grip. And then the voice changed. It wasn't friendly anymore. It wasn't even human. It rasped through the door, low and guttural, stretched thin like rubber about to snap. You're not him, but you will be. Silence. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the door, every muscle locked, waiting for it to burst open, but it never did. When I finally dared to look back at the notebook, one last line had appeared. Rule 7 never ends. Once it knows your name, the list becomes yours. My hands went numb. The knife slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. Because I finally understood what the missing guard had meant. He hadn't been writing rules to save himself. He'd been writing them for me, for whoever came next. And now, that person was me. I didn't sleep, not really. I must have drifted in and out, but every time my eyes closed, the walls breathed. The cracks between the bricks seemed to pulse, and the faint smell of iron, like pennies and rust, hung heavy in the air. By morning, my apartment felt like a coffin. I needed out. Not to leave the building, I knew better now, but just to move, to breathe air that didn't taste like rot. So I wandered the halls. Each step echoed too loud, bouncing back at me as though the walls themselves were mocking the sound. I passed 2A, 3C, 4D, each door shut tight as if welded closed. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe nobody else lived here at all. Maybe I was the only one left. That's when I heard it, a faint dripping, not water, thicker, slower. I followed the sound down the hallway until I stopped in front of an old maintenance closet. The metal door was streaked with dark stains, long dried, but the fresh sound, drip, 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 came from inside. My chest tightened as I pulled it open. At first, I thought the walls were painted red. Then I realized they weren't painted at all. They were bleeding. Thick, dark streaks of blood oozed from cracks in the plaster, winding down in uneven rivulets, pooling at the floor. The air was suffocating, heavy with copper. The notebook nearly leapt from my hands, snapping open to a new line. Rule 19. Do not touch what seeps. It remembers. I stumbled backward, knife in hand, but the blood kept coming, running down the walls like veins. Some of it bubbled, forming small blisters that swelled until they burst, spraying fine mist into the air. And then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was just in my head. But no, the sound came from the walls themselves. The blood carried voices, murmuring, gasping, crying. One of them sounded like me. I staggered back, heart racing, and the whispers grew louder. They weren't random. They were names, dozens of names spoken over and over in a desperate chant, and mine was one of them. I slammed the door shut, but the sound didn't stop. It followed me down the hall, seeping through the walls, pressing into my ears like invisible fingers. Don't ignore it. I froze. The voice hadn't come from the wall this time. It came from behind me. I spun, knife raised, but the hallway was empty. Just flickering lights, just the hum of electricity. Still, the voice lingered, coiling in my head. Don't ignore it. It wants you to look closer. I ran, back to my apartment, slamming the door, bolting it, dragging the couch in front just for good measure. I sat on the floor, clutching the notebook, shaking like a leaf. The pages flipped on their own again, but this time they didn't stop at one rule. Whole passages filled themselves in frantic, desperate scrawls. The walls keep the blood keeps the rules. Every guard before you is inside. If you listen too long, it takes your voice too. That's how it remembers. That's how it spreads. I slammed the book shut, but it was too late. I could still hear them, the voices. Even with the notebook closed, even with my hands pressed hard against my ears, they slipped through. One of them whispered my childhood nickname, a name no one here should know. I screamed, tore the notebook across the room, and pressed myself into the corner, rocking, begging for silence. But the walls pulsed, the cracks widened, and then something new appeared. Handprints. Bloody, pressed from the inside, pushing against the plaster until the fingers stretched long and thin, as though clawing to escape. One of them matched my size exactly. I don't remember picking up the notebook again, but somehow it was back in my lap, pages flipping, scribbles scratching themselves onto the paper faster than I could read. Rule 20. If the wall bleeds in your room, don't let it touch the floor. If it does, you're already gone. I looked up. The wall above my bed had begun to drip. Slowly, steadily, a dark red line ran downward, inching closer to the floor. I scrambled to grab anything, towels, sheets, my jacket, pressing them against the wall to stop the flow. But the blood soaked through instantly, warm and slick against my skin. The whispers screamed in my ears. You can't stop it. You're one of us now. I pressed harder, my arms covered in red, my clothes drenched. I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears blurred my vision. The notebook trembled violently, final words scrawling across the page. "You can't keep it out forever. The blood will find the floor, and when it does, it will take your name." I dropped everything and stumbled back, slipping on the soaked carpet, heart hammering. The line on the wall pulsed, swelled, and finally burst, a wave of blood pouring down, splattering against the floorboards. The voices went silent, dead quiet, and in that silence I heard only one word, spoken in my own voice, from the wall itself: mine. When the blood finally stopped dripping, the silence was worse than the noise. I sat there, soaked, the smell of iron filling my lungs until I thought I'd choke. My arms shook from pressing against the wall, and the carpet beneath me squelched with every tiny movement. But what unsettled me most wasn't the mess, it was the quiet. The walls had gone still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. That's when the notebook began to twitch again. I didn't want to touch it. I wanted to throw it out the window, let the rain soak it, let the street rats chew on its pages, but my hands acted on their own. The cover snapped open and the ink bled across the paper, curling into words I didn't want to read. Rule 8: do not follow the voices if they call you by name. They are not yours anymore. I froze. Rule 8. But I'd already heard my name, I'd already listened. Was it too late? I stared at the words until they blurred. They weren't steady like before. They bled into one another, warping and shifting as though the rule itself was alive, trying to wriggle off the page. The lights flickered, and for a moment I swore I wasn't alone in the room. A shadow stretched long against the wall, but there was nothing there to cast it. The air grew colder. My breath came out in short, pale clouds, and then I heard it, soft at first, a whisper at the edge of hearing. Daniel, my name. I shot up from the floor, blood-soaked clothes clinging to me, knife still in my hand. The sound came from the hallway, slow, drawn out, deliberate. Daniel. I pressed myself against the door, ear straining. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It sounded like my father. The same low rumble, the same tired edge. But my father had been dead for 6 years. The notebook thudded shut on its own, as if to remind me what I had just read. Do not follow the voices. I locked the deadbolt tighter and backed away, but the whisper grew louder, sharper, almost angry. Daniel, opened the door. I covered my ears, shaking my head, but the voice sank deeper. It wasn't sound anymore, it was inside me, like memory turned rotten, replaying itself wrong. Daniel, don't ignore me. I screamed, hurling the knife at the door, blade burying itself in the wood with a dull thunk. The voice stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavier than before. And then the blood in the carpet shifted. Not much, just a ripple, like something breathing beneath the floorboards. I stumbled back, tripping over the couch I'd pushed against the door earlier. My eyes locked on the dark stain spreading wider. It was moving, crawling. The notebook opened again. My eyes dragged toward it like magnets. If you hear the voice of someone you love, it is not them. Do not answer. Do not open the door. Every voice is a chain, and chains drag deep. The words dug into me like nails. I wanted to believe them, but the sound that filled the apartment next shattered me. It wasn't just my father anymore. It was my mother, my sister, my best friend from years ago. Each voice called in unison, overlapping, begging, pleading. Daniel, we're cold. Daniel, please, don't leave us here. Tears burned my eyes. My knees hit the soaked floor. The human part of me, the part that still loved, still cared, wanted to rip that door open. To see them, hold them, tell them I hadn't forgotten. But another part of me, the part that had seen the blood, the handprints, the shadows in the walls, knew better. If I opened that door, it wouldn't be them. It would never be them. The building groaned around me, beams creaking like a living body stretching its limbs. The whispers sharpened into screams, my name tearing through the air like claws against metal. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Dead silence again. I stayed frozen, heart pounding against my ribs. Seconds dragged into minutes. Finally, I forced myself to move, to peel my blood-stiffened shirt from my chest and sit upright. The notebook lay open in front of me, waiting. Another line appeared, slow this time, as if whoever or whatever was writing it wanted me to feel the weight of each word. Rule 8 is the oldest. The voices will never stop. You cannot save them. You cannot bring them back. If you try, you will join them, and then your voice will call the next. I didn't realize I was shaking until the knife slipped from my hands, clattering against the wood. It wasn't just about me anymore. If I broke this rule, if I gave in, I'd become part of the trap. My voice would join the others, and the next poor bastard sent here, they'd hear me calling their name. I pressed my palms to my ears and curled against the couch, rocking like a child. But even in silence, I could feel it, the temptation, the pull. The voices knew everything, every memory, every weakness. And sooner or later, I'd answer. I didn't sleep, not really. At some point, exhaustion must have pulled me under, but it wasn't rest. It was a shallow drowning. My mind caught between waking and whatever lives on the other side of dreams. I don't remember when I opened my eyes, but I do remember why, because the sound of something splitting filled the room. At first, I thought it was the ceiling, the wood above groaning under the weight of the building. But when I turned my head, I saw it, a hairline crack creeping up the wall across from me, jagged as lightning. It wasn't there last night. I pushed myself off the couch, still damp from the blood-soaked carpet, and stared. The plaster bulged, dust trickling down like sand through an hourglass. The crack widened in slow, deliberate motions, as though the wall wasn't breaking, it was opening. My stomach clenched. The notebook was already on the floor, waiting. Its pages flipped without wind, landing on another entry that hadn't been there before. The walls are not barriers, they are skin. When the skin breaks, something comes through. Do not look inside. The words swam in front of me. Do not look inside, but the human mind doesn't work like that. Tell someone not to look and it becomes impossible to resist. My feet moved closer against my will, crunching on dried flakes of plaster as the crack grew. The air leaking from the split was colder, damp, and it smelled of rot, like earth after rain mixed with something sour, something old. I pressed a trembling hand against the wall and felt a pulse, slow, heavy, like a heartbeat. The wall was alive. A low sound vibrated out from the opening, almost like a groan, almost like words I couldn't understand. I staggered back, but it followed me, echoing in my skull. My eyes flicked to the notebook again. More text scratched itself onto the page, jagged and fast this time, like someone carving the words with a knife. Do not answer, do not lean close. When it breathes, it is listening. When it listens, it learns. The crack spread wider. Long strands of something black and wet dangled from inside, swaying like hair in water. I gagged, stumbling over the couch again, but my eyes refused to look away. And then, God help me, I heard it whisper my name. Not from the hallway this time, not from behind the door, from inside the wall. Daniel. My knees buckled. It wasn't my father this time. It wasn't my mother or my sister. It was me, my own voice. The sound was warped, stretched thin like a recording played too slow, but there was no mistaking it. It was my tone, my cadence, every little crack and rasp I hated hearing on voicemail. I wanted to scream, but the noise caught in my throat. The wall shuddered, and from within the crack a hand pushed through. Pale, trembling fingers pressed against the plaster, nails bloody and bent. It was my hand. Not similar, not close, my hand. Same scar on the knuckle from when I fell as a kid, same crooked nail I'd smashed years ago. I staggered back until my spine hit the opposite wall, heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. My hand, the real one, clawed at the air as though by moving it I could prove I was still separate from whatever was trying to crawl out. The notebook snapped shut with a bang that echoed like a gunshot. The hand withdrew. The crack stopped widening, but it didn't close. It stayed there, gaping, throbbing faintly with that unnatural pulse. I don't remember how long I stood there staring, body locked, mind unraveling. At some point, the clock on the wall ticked past 3:00 a.m. and I collapsed back onto the couch, too drained to move but too terrified to shut my eyes. Every so often, the crack shivered. Dust would sprinkle down, and a faint exhale would seep into the room, cold and damp. Each time it did, I swore the apartment grew smaller, the air tighter, the blood on the floor wetter. And then, as if to confirm it wasn't over, the notebook opened again. The cracks will spread. Do not try to seal them. Do not touch what comes through. And above all, never speak to yourself. I clamped a hand over my mouth. My reflection in the black glass of the window shifted a second too late when I moved, lips curling into a grin I didn't make. The cracks weren't just in the walls anymore. They were in me. By the time dawn came, I felt less like a guard and more like a prisoner. The crack on the wall hadn't closed. It just sat there, breathing slowly, sometimes shivering as if it was waiting, watching. I couldn't bring myself to turn away from it for long. Every time I did, I felt eyes on me, not from the hall, not from outside, but from inside. The notebook lay open on the coffee table. I hadn't touched it, but sometime after 5:00 a.m., its pages began to flip on their own again. Dust stirred as if a breeze had passed through, though the air was still. And then on a page near the back, words etched themselves slowly, deliberate strokes like someone carving into stone. The last rule: when the cracks are wide, you must leave before you hear your name 3 times. My chest tightened. My name had already been whispered once, from inside the wall. If it called again, I wasn't sure I'd survive hearing it. But where could I go? The front door was locked with chains I couldn't cut. The windows opened to nothing but a black drop, like the building hung suspended in some void. I sat there, frozen, until the silence broke. A knock at the door, 3 steady taps, not hurried, not desperate, patient. I didn't move, my body locked, ears straining. The knock came again, followed by a voice. "Daniel." I almost vomited. It was my father's voice this time, but my father had been dead for 8 years. "Daniel, open the door, you shouldn't be in there." The cracks pulsed, shedding flakes of plaster like dry skin. The voice came again, closer this time. "Daniel." That was twice. The notebook pages rustled violently as if warning me, but my eyes were fixed on the door. Shadows shifted beneath it, something pacing just outside. For a brief, insane second, I thought about opening it, just to end the waiting, just to let whatever it was in. And then the third time came. "Daniel." Not my father's voice, not my mother's, not even my own like before. This time it was something deeper, layered, like 100 mouths speaking at once through a hole in the earth. The crack split wider down the wall, stretching from floor to ceiling, plaster bursting into chunks as something massive pressed against it from the other side. I staggered back, knocking over the coffee table, the notebook flying open. Words tore across the page so violently the paper nearly ripped. "Run." The door chain snapped loose, rattling like gunfire. The knob twisted on its own, slow and deliberate. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I bolted through the door into the hallway. The building had changed. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, doors on either side hanging open to rooms filled with shadows that writhed like water. My footsteps echoed too loud, bouncing off the walls in ways they shouldn't have. Behind me, the apartment door slammed shut. The sound rolled through the corridor like thunder. I ran, past doors with names I didn't recognize, past peeling wallpaper where more cracks split wide, each one oozing that same damp breath. Somewhere, deep inside the walls, I heard things crawling, dragging, scraping closer, and then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, barely visible in the flickering light, a stairwell. I sprinted, lungs burning, but the floor felt heavier with every step, like the building itself was trying to drag me down. My legs shook. My vision blurred. I could feel the word Daniel being whispered again and again. Not 3 times this time, but dozens, hundreds, overlapping from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. I slammed through the stairwell door and nearly fell down the steps. The stairs stretched downward into blackness, but at least they were there. At least they were real. I gripped the railing and plunged down, the whispers chasing me, the walls splitting open with each floor I passed. By the time I reached the bottom, I wasn't sure if I was still in the same building anymore. The air smelled wrong, heavy with rust and earth. The exit door stood crooked, its glass shattered, faint daylight leaking through. I didn't hesitate. I shoved through it into the cold morning air. Silence. The street outside looked normal. Cars parked along the curb, a trash truck groaning in the distance. People walked past, sipping coffee, talking on phones, unaware of what was behind that door. I turned back. The building was gone, or maybe it was never there. In its place was an empty lot overgrown with weeds, chain-link fence sagging with rust. No windows, no doors, nothing. The notebook lay in my hand. I don't remember picking it up, but it was there, heavier than before. Its last page was open. You survived for now. But remember, the cracks are everywhere, even in you. The words bled as I read them, the ink spreading like veins. I dropped it, heart hammering, but when it hit the ground, it was gone. I stood there until the sun rose fully, trying to convince myself I had imagined it all, that it was exhaustion, stress, a nightmare I hadn't fully shaken off. But then, as I finally started to walk away, I passed by a shop window. My reflection didn't move with me. It just smiled. And that was the last shift I ever worked. If you're still here, still listening, maybe ask yourself why. Maybe part of you already knows the cracks are widening. Look around your walls tonight. If you see them spreading, don't lean close. And if you hear your name whispered 3 times, don't wait for the 4th.